when they played the Pistons, to me, I was listening to the broadcast and the whole conversation is about how Detroit is so physical and they're going to fight you with tooth and nail and that they're going to make life difficult for you. Nobody wants to see them in a 7-game series, which I agree with all of that. But I don't think that San Antonio gets the credit for also being a highly physical team, a rough and tumble, difficult defense to deal with. And now you have their offense clicking where they have this synergy of elite drivers, elite spacers who will crush you on wide open threes, and then Wembanyama who can do it all. Like, I don't know what you're supposed to do. It's going to be difficult to figure out a formula, because if the formula is not be physical, foul, grab, push, hold, do everything you can do to slow these guys down and push them around, if that's not a sufficient formula, don't know what a formula is that exists to stop these guys.
I don't think there's ever really been a young team where it's been like, this team should have, and deservedly so, real expectations placed on them. Not just like oh, you know what? We got upset in round 1, or we lost the 2-3 in round 2, but we'll be back. Like, no, dude, the league is wide open right now. Go and get a championship.
This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host XJ. As always, I'm joined by my brilliant co-host Geoff. And Geoff, we have to talk about the San Antonio Spurs, the dominant San Antonio Spurs, who used to be known as like a fearsome defense, and now they're just scoring at will too. They are the hottest team in the NBA by far right now. Wemby is only getting better, only getting scarier. He's now decided to be, the best rebounder in the league. He's already the best blocksmith in the league, if you will. He is the best defensive impact player since prime Rudy Gobert already. Just turned 22 a month ago. The Spurs look built to compete in and win any series in the playoffs. They prove they can deal with any level of physicality, knocking off the most physical team in the NBA, in the Detroit Pistons, who themselves are title contenders. The Spurs currently, I looked it up before we jumped on the pod, are third in championship odds, I saw, and by a lot. Is this easy money, Geoff? And this is not gambling advice, by the way. But is Vegas, is the NBA, is everyone underestimating the San Antonio Spurs?
I think they're being severely slept on, honestly. I think definitely, you mentioned the Pistons game. I think people are really, really underrating that win, just how decisive it was and how good the Pistons are. Like, we knew from the games they played earlier in the season against the Thunder that they would be able to handle a team that's kind of defense first and leans in that direction. But one thing we weren't really 100% sure of is every team that faces the Pistons at some point is going to be put to a test in terms of, can you handle playoff level physicality? And, the Spurs passed that test with flying colors. This was just another positive in their direction, really, really, really overwhelming positive that they just keep racking them up. They really haven't failed many tests this entire season, and they're proving that they can win playing big, playing small. You want shooting? Okay, Vassell and Champagnie will hit a bunch of threes. You want tough defense? Castle, D you up, lock you up at the point of attack. Of course, you got Wembanyama waiting at the rim, but Wembanyama's not playing. Luke Cornett ain't a bad plan B. Like, they can play all these different ways. I think they're being slept on across the league, and there are a couple of reasons why, but I'm going to swing it back to you because I have a bit of a tepid take, and, Wembanyama inspires a lot of them, but I think while the team's being slept on, I think he's being slept on too in terms of just his general impact. Like, we see MVP conversations across the league. Cade just threw his hat into the ring. Everybody's always talking about SGA and Jokic. Some other names, maybe a couple not deserving names get tossed around, but it's almost like Wembanyama's taken for granted, or what I think, it's almost like maybe people don't fully understand just what he's doing out there.
All I know, Jeff, is that you better not be implying Jaylen Brown is not as good a MVP candidate as Wembanyama. That's all I'm saying right now.
I would never do such a thing. That would be blasphemy.
That'd be
Blasphemy.
blasphemy, and I appreciate you knowing that. I will say this: something about the team, and I'd love to hear your hot Wembanyama take because like all of the hot takes are out there for Wembanyama, and totally deservedly so. The guy is completely insane. As far as the team, the Pistons, I mean the Spurs themselves, when they played the Pistons, to me, I was listening to the broadcast, and the whole conversation is about how Detroit is so physical and they're going to fight you tooth and nail and that they're going to make life difficult for you. Nobody wants to see them in a 7-game series, which I agree with all of that. I think that that is all just objectively the case for Detroit. But I don't think that San Antonio gets the credit for also being a highly physical team, a rough and tumble, difficult defense to deal with. You know, we talked about this a little bit before we recorded. We were texting a little bit, and we talked about how the Spurs perimeter defenders are able to be highly physical because they know if they get blown by, guess who's there waiting for you? It doesn't really matter. There's a whole basically a dome over anywhere near in the paint near the rim, and you're not going there. So guess what Stephon Castle is going to do? He's going to ride you and play you super, super physically on the perimeter. And guess what De'Aaron Fox is going to do, who's an underrated perimeter defender who can stay in front of guys. And guess what Julian Champagnie is going to do? Like all of these guys are going to play really aggressive and tough defense. There's no breaks. And then, you know, oh, let's bring in our 20-year-old Carter Bryant, who's like an insane defender already at this point, you know, a few games into his career. So they don't get enough credit for also being a highly physical defense. So to me, I feel like they are structured in a way where they are able to and really built to deal with any team going into a playoff series and a postseason matchup. They can match up with anyone. They, like you suggested, they have such a well-rounded team. You have guys who can create elite rim pressure, and De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle, and obviously Harper to a lesser extent when he plays. You have elite spacing in Devin Vassell and Julian Champagnie. You have balanced kind of wing level support with Harrison Barnes and Keldon Johnson. You have the elite center in the game from a defensive standpoint and Victor Wembanyama, and one of probably going to be one of the elite defensive centers in the history of the game, you know, definitely trending that way and is almost unlikely to even not be that in a weird way. So, and then like you said, mentioned Luke Cornett behind them, who is super solid overall. They just are built like so fundamentally sound and well-rounded that to me, they're just going to be extremely difficult. And they showed that against the Pistons. They've shown that against, you know, multiple teams throughout this season, beating the Thunder a number of times. Like, I just think this might be the team to beat in the league, and being third in championship odds at this point in time feels like weird and inappropriate. So something feels off about that to me.
And you know, they thrashed the Rockets before the break in a way where it was like they showed that they're also methodical. Like the way that they exposed Amen Thompson's lack of shooting and their Mitch Johnson's general strategy of ghosting him, which if you haven't seen it, we just did a whole video essay on. They're tough, they're smart, they can do pretty much everything. And the thing you said about Castle's defense, his point of attack defense, and Fox and the other guys, it's a perfect segue into what I want to talk about, because you and I, we toss around this idea of passive impact. And for, if you're new here, basically what passive impact is it's what you do when you're not on the ball either on offense or on defense. So either on offense, you don't have the ball in your hands, and on defense, you're not directly guarding the ball. It's all the ways that you make your team better without touching the ball. These are super important forms of value because they coincide with the more active impact. If you can do these things, you fit really well with these guys who can score at a highly efficient rate or a highly effective rate. And they're just really slept on forms of value. And this leads me to Wembanyama, because I truthfully think that the things that Wembanyama does, we're going to look back in 5 years and we're going to say, holy cow, we were totally underrating just how important he was, how influential he was, and the positive domino effect that his presence just created for his teammates. And your example of Castle and Cade Cunningham was perfect. Stephon Castle was incredible against Cade Cunningham when they played the Pistons. Absolutely remarkable. And when you're watching that game, it's so hard not to focus on anything else. Like this guy, this second year player, he's up in Cade Cunningham, MVP candidate, all up in him. Like he's showing physicality, he's showing quick feet, he's showing quick hands, he's doing everything an elite defender can do. And this is not to take credit away from Castle and what he can do, but we don't have the I don't think we are properly giving credit to the idea that Wembanyama's presence is what makes that fully possible. It is what fully maximizes that form of defense. Because like you said, Castle is allowed to be more aggressive because the times when Cade Cunningham gets past him, it doesn't matter. There's nobody who comes close since Prime Gobert of just completely negating any sort of rim pressure, any sort of paint pressure. If you're within 8 feet of the basket, I could make a 5-minute compilation of clips from the game against the Pistons, and not even including the 6 blocks that Wembanyama had, of all the shots that Wembanyama altered that were in the paint. Pistons just shooting differently, shooting less confidently, changing the way they shot, not shooting at all, just because of his presence. And you might be listening to this, you might be a Spurs fan, you might not be a Spurs fan, and you might disagree with me, but I hope you at least hear this point. I think that we do not properly understand just how valuable the presence of Victor Wembanyama is. And this is the thing that makes him really rare. Like somebody could say, okay, well, Rudy Gobert did the same thing. Prime Rudy Gobert, what makes him any difference? Was his defense actually underrated? Maybe it was. Maybe Rudy Gobert's defensive presence actually was underrated in the way that it intangibly elevated his teammates, made them more confident, made them more close to their ceiling more consistently because, oh, well, you know what? If they burn me, they burn me. Rudy's going to pick me up. Like maybe that is the case. But guess what? Wembanyama turns around and he has that same passive impact on the other side of the ball. Now, all of a sudden, I mentioned the video essay about ghosting Amen Thompson, about playing off Amen Thompson. Guess what you can't do against the Spurs with Stephon Castle? You cannot put a center on him and try to hide a wing on Wembanyama because Wembanyama can shoot threes. He can dominate that wing. You have to keep your center on Wembanyama. All of a sudden, Stephon Castle can get to the rim at will. Victor Wembanyama's presence does that. And to me, you look at the impact data, you look at all the best top-down metrics. They're telling us that the Spurs are this loaded team, which I think they are to a certain extent. I think that Wembanyama's teammates do an unbelievable job of capitalizing on the ways that Wembanyama elevates them. They in different ways, they do that. But I think that we are missing the forest for the trees, and we are not, again, accurately, fully conceptualizing just the way that Victor Wembanyama's presence elevates all those around him.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it is hard to quantify all of those effects that he's having on his teammates, even just from a confidence standpoint. And so when you talk about, I know Wemby's behind me, like, I can just play as aggressively as I want. And not only that, like, I'm not worried about gambling or taking opportunities that I might not otherwise. And it's something that you mentioned to me before we started recording, like a freedom that you have to play really, really free defensively is just something that I think is, how can we quantify that? That's completely underrated in terms of what that allows you to do defensively. We know rim attempts plummet when Wembanyama's on the court, obviously, like nobody wants to come near the rim, but also short mid-range attempts plummet as well. Like everything you do as an opponent, it has to be on the perimeter now. So if your defensive opponents, your teammates know that their opponent has to stay out there on the perimeter. What does that free you up to do? It frees you up to be a different kind of player defensively. And we see the Spurs just recognize that. It's really incredible. It's highly synergistic when you think about it. It's like it requires that recognition. It requires that understanding, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship for both Wemby and his teammates. When Wemby's on the court, teams are essentially playing a different game than the rest of the league. It's that dramatic. It's like every time you step into the paint, it's like the rim shrinks like a carnival game. Anytime you're in the paint, your chances of making a shot plummet dramatically when Wembanyama's on the court. So strategically, it actually makes sense just from like a logical game theory standpoint. It makes sense for you as an opponent of the Spurs to shoot more from further away from the basket because it's not as hard. So it's like you're doing the correct thing, but it's not as hard as it would be against other teams. The problem is it's still as hard to score from away from the basket as it is against other teams. So now you're just in this different kind of paradigm almost. I think it's really interesting to think about it in that way, where you're just in a different paradigm than every other team when you're playing against the Spurs. And it is that dramatic. I think it was similarly dramatic with Rudy Gobert. And I do think he did not get enough credit for what he was doing defensively. I do think he did not give enough credit. And I love to hear from Spurs fans, not the 12-year-old Spurs fans who respect to you all. You're growing up at a great time to be a Spurs fan, but the ones who have watched at least a few years back and seen prime Rudy Gobert, I'd love to think if you think that comparison is obsolete at this point. Is it just that Wembanyama is so much better? It's just a different animal, a different beast, a different alien than Rudy Gobert? Or do you think it's similar and Wembanyama has room to grow? It's 22 years old. He's going to get better. He's going to get smarter. His positionality is going to be better. His coaches are going to figure out how to better leverage him. He's going to get better teammates. If his teammates that already are there, like Dylan Harper, don't just stay there and get better, he'll get better teammates than Dylan Harper. So either get a better version of Harper or just a better teammate than him. And so he's going to just get better as he gets throughout his career. So maybe he's not there yet, but right now the trajectory is unparalleled. It's completely unparalleled. And it's really scary for the league. And I know people use the scary hours and all this stuff like very exaggeratorially, but it is if this guy is if this is not his prime and he's not near his prime and he's going to get better and his teammates are going to get better. If Stephon Castle gets better, De'Aaron Fox is in his prime, but works extremely well with Wembanyama. Like, what is going to happen? What is going to happen to the league? And if they are already a prime title contender now. So I think it's a crazy thing to think about.
It's absolutely nuts to think about. And the thing is that makes it so unprecedented is like going back through basically the history of the league, looking at MVPs or looking at the faces of the generation. You go from Jordan to LeBron to Steph to, all these guys, they share a lot of characteristics in the way that they profile. We've never seen a best player in the league like Wemby, who so much of what he brings is passive in this way. But it's like, we always joked like when Giannis came up, like, oh, well, what if you gave Rudy Gobert offense? Well, we're not just giving Rudy Gobert offense with Victor Wembanyama. It's not like, oh yeah, it's like when people said that, it was like, oh, what if Giannis, what if this fadeaway was more consistent? Like with Victor Wembanyama, he has off-ball gravity in a way that shooters have. He has post-up games that the way people wanted Dwight Howard to have. Like this is from an impact standpoint, from a possession by possession by possession. I'm truly unsure if we've ever seen a guy elevate his teammates and impact a possession so consistently the way he does.
I think that's all true. I do want to, and you mentioned these guys, you talked about kind of briefly the shooters on the Spurs. I think that the unsung heroes of this team are Devin Vassell and Julian Champagnie. Like, I think that they get talked about as like, oh, they're real contributors and cool. Oh, Vassell scores 28 points and it's like, man, that guy really had a hot game. Even when he doesn't, I just don't think these guys get enough credit for what they do as spacers for this team. I don't think this team really works in the way that it does without those two guys in specific. What they do as spacers is incredible. Champagnie shooting 37% overall, but much more importantly, 46% on wide open threes he's shooting. It's an incredible number. Vassell, 37% overall as well, 41% on wide open threes. This means that they punish you if you, for any reason, leave them. If you make a bad rotation, if you choose to load up on Wemby to deal with some of the stuff that you described as far as Wembanyama's offense, if you have to rotate away from them to deal with a guard like Fox or Castle or Harper, who are driving to the paint at like ridiculous levels, like Fox and Castle and Harper all have pretty similar drive rates. So Castle drives 13 drives per 30 minutes. Fox 12 drives per 30 minutes, and Harper 11 drives per 30 minutes. Those guys are living in the paint constantly. They have the spacing with Wemby as their 5 pulling rim protectors away from the rim. And so they put you in a really difficult, precarious position constantly. And if you try to rotate and deal with the rim pressure that you're just getting possession after possession, that's relentless every single time, because there's always one of those guys on the court, and you try to deal with them and you try to rotate, you're getting punished with Julian Champagnie and Devin Vassell wide open threes, which go down at elite rates. Sorry, I don't know what you're supposed to do. No wonder we're seeing the Spurs offense start to peak at this point in time. Like their defense was already elite, obviously, when Wembanyama was on the court. Wembanyama is a defense in of himself. You can put him with any other 4 guys and there'll be an elite defense. When he's on the court, they are, the best defense in the league. I think it's a 106.4 per 100 possessions when he's on the court. When he's not on the court, their average defense 116.3 per 100. So when he's on the court, they're elite defense, best defense in the league. And now you have their offense clicking where they have this synergy of elite drivers, elite paint attacker pressure players, elite spacers who will crush you on wide open threes, and then Wembanyama who can do it all. Like, I don't know what you're supposed to do. And so it's going to be difficult to figure out a formula, because if the formula is not be physical, foul, grab, push, hold, do everything you can do to slow these guys down and push them around. If that's not a sufficient formula, don't know what a formula is that exists to stop these guys.
Yeah, they have, again, shown to have an answer for anything thrown at them, anything so far. And it makes sense given the versatility that we've talked about. They can be very malleable. They're going to face a point where they're going to be asked, are you just going to keep trying to, jam a square peg into a round hole, or are you going to pivot and try something else? And in my opinion, they not only have the roster flexibility to pivot, but they've shown a sense of open-mindedness and a willingness to, okay, let's try to find a different solution, which is really nice. You mentioned that quadrant of Fox, Champagnie, Vassell, and Wembanyama outscoring opponents by over 21 points per 100 possessions in the non-garbage time possessions that they're playing. Just completely dominant. And it makes sense. Like, what could you do with those 4? Like, who is even a bad player you could stick with those 4 players? It's like impossible to find a bad 5th player to stick with those 4 guys. They check every single box. You put the ball in Fox's hands. Wemby was basically, like, I know the final box score didn't, at least from a shooting efficiency standpoint, didn't look, but Wemby had Jalen Duren. There were back-to-back possessions, XJ, where Castle got a dunk and a layup, where Jalen Duren actually just got out of the way and was like, okay, I would rather he just got that dunk than Wemby got a lob, or that's what Wemby does to you. He just puts you in these impossible spots, and when he's the screen setter, he has all this gravity again. Everybody's benefiting from it. And like you said, Champagnie and Vassell, elite off-ball gravity. You're gonna stick to them. All of a sudden, Fox's driving lanes get a little bit more open. Everything works in synergy when they play together. And I don't know. I feel like speed. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, to me, there's only one potential weakness, and I call it a potential weakness because they've beaten the Oklahoma City Thunder 3 times this season. And the potential weakness I see is sort of the potential weakness that the Rudy Gobert Jazz had, which is you space them out and you pull him away from the rim. And teams have tried to do this. Mitch Johnson has tons of ways that he can keep Wembanyama close to the rim, or at least like, within distance, be able to recover to the rim, regardless of what you do. But we haven't seen this consistently. And I mean like a true elite shooting, deep range shooting five, like a Karl Anthony Towns. And to be honest, like I think the Knicks have a pretty good archetype for like how to deal with this team, at least, in terms of their defense, but the Knicks don't play this way. So it doesn't really matter. It's really moot, because imagine a lineup for the Knicks of Brunson, Deuce McBride when he's healthy, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Karl Anthony Towns. Who is Wembanyama guarding in that lineup? He's probably not going to guard Towns, most likely. That's going to be Harrison Barnes. And so he's probably guarding OG Anunoby. Is he going to be able to stay near the rim to guard OG? Are you going to ghost coverage OG? Like, to be honest, in a playoff dynamic, that's something I might have to live with, but that's playing with fire. If you're just going to say, hey, OG beat us from three, that's not a Josh Hart. That's a guy who's going to attempt to do that. And so it could cause a little precarious situation for them if they play against a team that has a true shooting five who can shoot from three with range, that you're definitely not going to put Wembanyama on. It'll force him to ghost coverage a wing who can actually hurt you out there. But to be honest, there's not really teams that they're going to come against they're going to face that are going to be able to present this problem. In Oklahoma City, hasn't necessarily implemented their team in that way, with Hartenstein playing and sometimes, playing along with Chet or either instead of Chet. Chet is also like a very slow release kind of shooter. Not the best shooter in the league, not the highest volume shooter in the league. So he's not as dangerous as a guy like a Karl Anthony Towns or someone like that. So to me, that's kind of the only dynamic I could see is like their defense having some trouble with. But like, is that even like a practical thing that they're going to face going through the Western Conference and even in the Eastern Conference? And most likely not. So I think I don't really see this as like a practical thing that's going to knock them off. I think it could serve a problem. But it depends on if they even come up against that problem.
Yeah. The Knicks are the archetype there. And obviously the Knicks would have to win the East, which is no walk in the park. They're currently fourth. So the Knicks would have to beat Detroit, who they've gotten slaughtered by every time they've played them, and then beat one of Cleveland or Boston. Like, okay, I'm not saying the Knicks can't do that, but if you're telling me what's standing in the way right now of the Spurs winning a championship, it's, oh no. And by the way, even if they met the Knicks in the championship, and even if the Knicks were like, oh, you know what will work against the Spurs? 5 out, we're going to do that more. There are still tons of other factors that could just swing the Spurs' way. So like, these are pretty great odds that we're talking about here. And to bring it back to how you started the show, are the Spurs being slept on? Absolutely. Like, they are just, to me, for my money right now, with the East being the cluster that it is and the way the West is shaking up, the Thunder and Spurs should be in their own tier. It should be them. And I think we're kind of looking at a head-on collision Western Conference Finals. The reason that I wouldn't have the Spurs over the Thunder might just come down to home court advantage. Like, that's still a valuable thing, even though it's kind of been suppressed in 2026. Still a valuable thing. And if the Spurs can't steal that 1 seed, even with SGA out, beating the Thunder is already tough enough. Beating the Thunder without home court advantage would be really tough. But you mentioned it. This is a young team. This is their, honestly, this is going to sound really lame, but I love stuff like seeing new teams in the playoffs, seeing new fan bases get these experiences. And I'm sure some Spurs fan will be like, okay, dude, like, we've won 5 championships, but let's be honest, it's been a minute for the Spurs, and that's awesome. That's so cool for them that they're going to get back to this. Wembanyama, just one of the coolest things about him is how much he clearly loves it, how into it he is, how fired up he is. Like, he wants to win. there are those clips of him on the France national team. Like, dude, these playoffs for Spurs fans are gonna, again, I know that the older Spurs fans can ring back to 1999 and 2002 and all the years that they won championships, and I'm not taking anything away from that, but this is going to be an awesome, awesome experience for them. And it's really unique in the sense of, I don't think there's ever really been a young team where it's been like, not title or bust, but it doesn't feel like a free roll, like this team should have, and deservedly so, real expectations placed on them, not just like oh, you know what? We got upset in round 1, or we lost the 2-3 in round 2, but we'll be back. Like, no, dude, the league is wide open right now. Go and get a championship.
I think it's a great segue into the last thing that we need to talk about. I think pretty briefly. You and I have talked in the past earlier this season about how the Spurs should really look to maximize their title chances right now, just like you described. The league is wide open. You have prime Wembanyama, or not prime Wembanyama, I should say, but MVP level Wembanyama, who is not yet in his prime. And you have to max out your chances given those circumstances, because you never know what the future holds. You never know what things look like in the future. There's plenty of teams and players who have been like, yeah, I'll be back. And then for whatever variety of reasons, that opportunity doesn't come to pass necessarily. So you have to max out chances to win a title and worry about future championships later. In my opinion, that's kind of my perspective. And maybe this is a difference between me and maybe you as well, and some Spurs fans. Because we talked about looking to potentially trade like Dylan Harper, for instance, for a player who fits better with Fox, Castle, and Wemby. And the Spurs and Mitch Johnson clearly also don't believe this is a perfect fit. These Fox, Castle, and Harper have only played together for 45 possessions all season. 45 possessions the entire season. Those three have played together. They're minus 12 per 100 in those 45 possessions. Obviously a tiny sample size, but it's a tiny sample size for a reason. And so I've noticed that Spurs fans, it feels like you guys are like incensed by this idea that the Spurs would trade Dylan Harper or Stephon Castle or one of them for a player who is already better now, like kind of like a more prime like age player who's already better and who fits better with the rest of the team. And I'm genuinely open-mindedly curious about this. I am not trying to be combative. I want to understand your perspective a little bit deeper, because for me, for example, if you could have traded Dylan Harper and the picks for some star level guy that actually fits with Wemby really closely, I don't see the potential championship odds that you're increasing from, if Vegas wants to have him at third and like a far and away third. If you were to do that, Vegas would probably have them in the tier with the Thunder, or maybe above the Thunder, and I would definitely have them as number one in the league with in terms of championship potential. If you want to have number one championship potential right now, while Wembanyama is on a rookie contract, he's 22 but playing at an MVP level, I would take that over the potential for what Dylan Harper could be in the future and stretching this thing out to like a dynasty kind of situation, because there's just too many things that can go wrong. And so to me, if you have the potential to win a championship and be a favorite to win a championship, I just take that, really 10 out of 10 times. So that's my perspective on it. And I'd love to hear Spurs fans' perspectives on it, from not just from a, hey, you two clowns, you guys are idiots, blah, 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 like that kind of stuff. Like that's not really how we like to engage on this channel at High End Theory, but just give me your genuine perspective on why that feels wrong to you. And I'd love to hear that in detail.
I just want to say, to add on to what you're saying, like, I don't think that this perspective is set in stone by any means. Like, we could just end up being wrong. But I do think that the outcomes where we look the most wrong are actually not all the ones where the Spurs win a championship anyways. Like, let's be clear about that. The outcomes where we look wrong, and we are wrong, are the ones where Fox, Castle, and Harper gain some level of synergy and can share the court together. Because every time, if somebody has a good game, and whether it's Castle, whether it's Harper, whoever it is, one of them has a good game and somebody pops up and is like, oh, you guys wanted to trade him, you're kind of that's missing the point. It's not that they're not good players. It's not that they can't have good games. It's that the ceiling of the team is slightly suppressed if they all can't have good games simultaneously. If that is disallowed, if Castle and Fox are having great games, and you have a game like they played recently against the Pistons, where Castle is, again, Cade Cunningham 5 of 26 because Castle's shutting him down, and De'Aaron Fox is getting the offense going because Wemby's not making his shots or whatever. Okay, well, Fox and Castle are going to play a lot. Guess who's not playing a lot? That's Harper. And so if you have a strong counter argument to that, why it's good to have three of them and two on the court at one time, for example, like make that your argument. But for me, what's most important to me is that at least the perspective is understood. And the perspective is that if you were able to trade Harper, for example, like imagine if they traded him for a Lauri Markkanen, Castle and Fox having great games wouldn't prevent Lauri Markkanen from being on the court and helping in different ways. And his gravity, people benefiting from his gravity. He wouldn't just be sitting on the bench watching two guys have a great game. And so maybe that's a limited perspective. I'm open to that. I'm open to being wrong about that. But at least, Castle just had a good game. Why would you want to trade him? Like that's reductive, and it's not really the point of what we're trying to get at here.
Yeah, and I love how you articulated that. Yeah, I was just laughing because I was just thinking about De'Aaron Fox, Devin Vassell, Lauri Markkanen, Victor Wembanyama, and Stephon Castle together. It's just like,
or Champagnie,
whichever. It's just like that feels like to me if that was the Spurs, I feel like we wouldn't be talking about it as like, man, should they be like, ranked third in title odds? Should they be in the tier with the Oklahoma City Thunder? It would be like, this is far and away the number one team in the league, and they're going to win a title this season. If they don't, then something went tragically wrong. That's how I feel like we talk about it. So that's kind of like summarizes like where I come from with it. But yeah. Well, any last words you want to say, Geoff?
Yeah, I just also want to say, I'm curious if Spurs fans see this changing. That's another thing that I think is important about this, because if you're a Spurs fan and you're like, they haven't played together a lot this year. Well, Harper's a rookie and Castle's in year 2. Like, yeah, Mitch Johnson is easing them in. Harper's not playing big minutes. There aren't many minutes for them to play together, and they are trying to win. 2 years from now, this is going to look way different. Castle's going to be more established. Harper's going to be more capable off the ball. If that's your perspective, totally respect that. That would be a huge counter to what our perspective is, and totally respect that. I couldn't say that that's definitely wrong, but to me, that has to be baked into your perspective to defend it. Because if you're saying, well, I don't think they're ever going to play together, I don't see them on the court ever, and I just don't think the redundancies matter, well, I don't think we're going to see eye to eye. To me, if you're saying, if you don't think they should trade them, then you have to see an outcome where the three of them can share the court together. Otherwise, a year, 2 years from now, whenever it is, if they haven't overcome the fit deficiencies and won a championship ever because the talent is just so strong, if that hasn't occurred, we're going to be having these conversations about trading one of them, except Harper and Castle are both going to be older, closer to getting paid, and everyone is going to understand, hey, you guys really want to trade one of these guys because you don't think they're the best fits. You're trying to get a better fit. The leverage is gone. There was a lot of value in getting out in front of this and potentially further capitalizing on this season where a championship is very much there for the taking for them.
Yeah, that's well said. And I mean, at the end of the day, that is a conversation that we'll kind of get more information on as things go along. But as it stands right now, the Spurs look dominant. They look like the best team in the league currently. They look like a team that is the hottest team in the league. And they look like a team that can handle any test that you put up against them, matchup wise or otherwise. So they could very well end up winning a title this season, and it would not shock me one bit, because that's how good they are. That's how good Wembanyama is already at this age. And again, not to overuse it, very scary for the rest of the league. But appreciate you joining. Appreciate you being open-minded. That's what we love here. We want to be open-minded. We'd love for our audience to be that way as well. We'd love to hear you in the comments and hear your perspectives and counter what we think or agree with what we think. Either way, as long as it's thoughtful and open-minded, we love those kind of comments, and we engage and respond to each and every single one of them that we get down there. So appreciate you joining and listening. For Geoff, I'm XJ, and this has been Hot Hand Theory.